Hey, you remember that bridge that Ukraine blew up connecting Russia to Crimea?
Yep, the Kerch Bridge.
Yeah. You know, they renamed the river that went over to Crimea River.
Oh!
I'll have you know, I did not read that joke anywhere. I made that joke up.
I believe it.
I don't think that's the point of pride you think it is.
This is the quality that you get with security this week.
Right?
So, Patrick, how was your Halloween?
It was good.
Is anybody buried in your yard?
I'll never tell. You'll never get me pot of gold.
Yeah. All right. So we've got 2 weeks. We've got a week to make up for. And so there's 8 stories today. Who wants to start?
So I'll start. This one's actually interesting as a parent. And as a security expert. One of the things I get asked a lot is, how do you protect kids online? How do you worry about digital privacy? You know, that sort of stuff. And it's difficult. I'll tell you. I have like all the devices in the house locked down. The wireless is locked down. Each of the devices is going through a pie hole so that they're not getting advertising, and they don't have tracking. And then all of that's going through an open DNS that's further filtering.
Can I stop and ask one question?
Sure.
What's a pie hole besides your mouth?
You shut your pie hole.
Take that in your pie hole.
No E.
Yeah, shut your
Actually,
pie
it's really
hole.
kind of cool. Yeah, no E. So this way, it's actually kind of neat just to diverge a little bit. So Pi hole is a device you put, is a Raspberry Pi. And there's an operating system, a Buster operating system build from, just search for Pi-hole, P-I-H-O-L-E.
Okay.
And when you push it down to the Raspberry Pi and run it, it runs like your internal DNS server. So you point all the internal house, clients at your house at it as a DNS server, and it filters out ads and tracking.
This is ringing a bell. Did we talk about this before?
A long time ago.
I don't know if personally we may have. I don't know that we did on this. Maybe a year ago.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll add a
great
link to
little
it.
device. Actually, if you ever play like mobile games, you know how sometimes to get like extra coins or gold or whatever, you need to watch an ad.
Yeah.
If you click, I'll watch the ad never shows up and they just give you the coins.
Wow.
Because they can't communicate with the ad server. So it's actually really kind of a neat device. So like I'm constantly trying to make it so that my kids aren't getting tracked online, what they're viewing, that sort of stuff. And I'll tell you, it's difficult. It's hard. Because then constantly I'm finding like ad developers and whatnot are getting craftier and craftier. So the whole point of this story, this is a Gizmodo story. It says new kids privacy app teaches digital privacy while blocking trackers. So it's an app designed to help not track children online. And what's weird is in the United States, there's a law that says that companies that do tracking, ad companies, whoever, cannot track children under 13. So once they get to 13, apparently it's okay to know everything about them, but under 13, they're not supposed to be tracked.
So this is the COPPA law, right?
Yes. And it's interesting in that a lot of companies don't really make that distinction.
Yeah.
They don't say, hey, if you're under 13, like I know Google does. When I signed up the kids' accounts for Google, when they were under 13, it made me approve a parent and that sort of stuff. And as soon as they became 13, both Microsoft and Google sent me an email saying, your child's 13 now, and they're going to get tracked on what they're using, blah, whatever. So, but there are a lot of companies that don't do that.
So I know this. Every time I publish a video to YouTube, one of the questions is this safe for kids under 13? And I always say no. Because if you do, then now you're on the line for more responsibility. And there's no comments. You can't have comments if it's for kids. So,
and if you've ever listened to anything from Carl, it's not safe for children. So
absolutely, it's not safe for humans.
Not for human consumption.
No.
I think it's neat that I think there should be more companies out there trying to protect children online. I think unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often as it should. But
so is this an app that I can download in the App Store and just put it on my kid's phone and say, here, Do they have to interact with it? Is it like gamified? How does it work?
Yeah, so it is an app that you install on the phone, and I haven't had a chance to actually install it and play with it yet. I've read through the article on what it does, and like I said, frankly, all my children are over 13 at this point, so probably not as helpful. But for people with young children, it probably makes a lot of sense to put this on devices that they had.
But the app is called Do Not Track Kids, right?
Yeah. Well, that's how they're referring to it in the article. My takeaway is that it's just an app that does something in the background more than it being interactive or a game.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it, and it looks like what it's doing is like routing DNS through there. So any kind of name requests out on the internet, it's routing it through the Do Not Track Kids site, so they can do what the Pi-hole does.
Yeah.
Right.
You should combine this with a game called Pi-hole, where you're trying to like flip beanbags into somebody's big old gob.
You should.
What is this? The early 2000s?
It is.
I know, right? Yeah. Angry Birds. All right. So what's next? Microsoft is in the news, it looks like.
Wouldn't be a week without Microsoft.
Yeah, this is just a little disturbing. So, according to Hacker News, Microsoft confirms server misconfiguration led to 65,000-ish companies being leaked, data leak.
This seems to me like the first data leak I've heard from Microsoft. Have there been others?
So there has, actually. If we remember, I don't remember which episode we had done it on. But there was a compromise of the Azure backend database Cosmos DB.
Oh, yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, where you could see other customers' data and that sort of stuff. So these things do crop up from Microsoft from time to time. I mean, listen, I trust Microsoft security engineers way more than trying to hold on to my own data. They do a fantastic job in a lot of ways. Yeah. But this proves to show that even experts on the global stage of cybersecurity and defense and configuration, sometimes do the wrong thing. Sometimes, implement something and miss a checkbox or whatever it may be, and
human error
data get us out on the internet. So
this misconfiguration was in an area called Azure Blob Storage, which is going to be funny to anyone who has no idea what that means. But blob storage is sort of just a place where you can dump files, right? I mean, it's just binary data that you can put in a directory. This
is reminiscent of the Bitbucket problem that Amazon had long ago.
What was that?
They had a problem where you basically, a long time ago, back in the earlier days, Bitbuckets were a place for you to like throw data, and there was a problem with the authentication with the security of them. The default security of them.
Yeah,
so
we still see
AWS S3 buckets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we see right now it's actually like it's almost impossible to configure an S3 bucket to be open to the world. It's like really hard.
As a reaction to that.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's like if you go through and you say, hey, I want to open this up to everybody. It goes, yeah, okay. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you double sure? And you say yes, and it still doesn't open it up. And it's like, no, I knew you didn't mean that. Yeah. And then you have to go to like other security.
You need to
settings
list every IP address.
They've made it much harder. Yeah, right. It gets hard.
All the .NET Rocks shows used to be on Amazon S3 buckets.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, and we've seen customers get compromised. I put in air quotes. We've seen sensitive data get pulled over open S3 buckets because they used to be hard to configure. And the same thing with Blob, right? It's just object storage. Usually it's a place you throw, unstructured data, file data, if you will, that you're going to either ingest in a particular way. Like I know we use object storage for a lot of the wireless tracking that we do. So, it's sometimes hard to understand who may have access to that data and who doesn't have access to that data. And, especially when configuring. Most cloud providers are really good about always assuming lockdown configuration first. And in this particular case, it just apparently seems like it wasn't configured that way.
And the important thing to know for our listeners is that it doesn't affect their on-premises servers. This is something that happened in Azure, which is their cloud platform, and it's been fixed.
And Microsoft's notifying people as well, and it's being termed blue bleed. So if you hear that term, that's what it's in response to.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I really like about this article, honestly, is the fact that we do red team offensive engagements all the time. We're always in the middle of attacking customers' networks, and inevitably, and one of the things that we do is we invite the customer to actually sit on the call with us. For the 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're hitting their network, so they can see what we're doing and ask questions and engage and be a part of the process,
which nobody else does.
Yeah, well, so. And what we inevitably find is the chagrins from the customer when they go, oh, yeah, we did just accept the default install for that. We were going to go back and secure it, and we just completely forgot, right? Because we have so many things we're working on. We had to get it up and running. We got it up and running, but we never went back and actually tightened it down. And I always tell them, you know what? Don't feel bad. It happens all the time. It absolutely does. Like, part of your deployment process has to be security review and that sort of stuff, but it happens all the time. And this is a great example of a top tier player in the market falling prey to the same thing, right? It happens, right? So, it's a part of your process should always be a review after anything is deployed.
It keeps us in business.
It does.
Yeah.
Which we like.
Well, speaking of Azure, because who wants to tackle this next one?
Azure Front Door in phishing attacks? Go ahead.
Yeah, so cyber criminals use Azure Front Door in phishing attacks. Phishing is the biggest thing at this point for breaching organizations. We see it as the number one attack vector from criminals. We see it as the easiest way, honestly, to break into an organization, to the point where when we do red team engagements with customers, we usually say, listen, do you want us to phish? Do you want us to send you an email that looks really, really, really real? That your users will click on? They go, no, we know our users are going to click on stuff. Why don't you just try and hit the networks? So it's almost assumed at this point that someone's going to click on something they shouldn't have clicked on. So what's interesting here is you're always trying to find very unique ways to get your phishing email through to an organization as a criminal, right?
Yeah.
If you send it from your home email server, it gets flagged, right? Everybody goes, oh, well, this came from an untrusted email server. It came from an email server that's brand new, or it came from an email server that's not, hasn't been registered for a long time, whatever.
Right.
So, what happens is a lot of criminals get more and more and more crafty.
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit, if you're not familiar with Azure Front Door is a CDN. So all it is a content distribution network. It gives you the ability to scale for larger audiences for a website. So I could put images and resources up into a CDN, and it distributes it everywhere around the world. And that way, if somebody in Australia requests it or somebody in London requests it, comes from the local content distributor,
which means it's going to get there faster,
and it makes it far more resilient to denial of service.
Right. So which sounds really good. So then everybody, browsers and whatnot, go, oh, it's coming from the CDN. It's coming from Cloudflare. It's coming from, Microsoft. It's coming from whoever, these really big names. And the problem is now the attackers are like, well, that's where I'm going to host my resources. So now it looks like, in this particular case, for example, they had Amazon, AMAZON -UK dot azurefrontdoor.net, right? So that looks legitimate. And Azure Front Door is trusted by a ton of different sites. So really hard for you to pick out, phishing attempts in this particular case.
Right.
So
is there anything anybody can do about it? I mean, it's an Azure hack. So obviously, hopefully they patched it, right?
They got
to police it. They can't patch it. They've got to find bad actors and shut them down. They can't, because you just spin up another entity and say, hey, I'm doing legitimate business, and then they don't.
Yikes.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Patrick. There is no patch. The worst hacks of all are the ones where they're legitimately using a legitimate service like Front Door in a normal way. Because, if they were doing something unique or weird or hacky, if you will, then it's like, oh, we'll just stop that thing from being able to be done. But in this case, they're using it just like any other customer would use Front Door, which makes it much harder to detect. So just be careful with
scrutinized, yeah.
And especially if they're doing something like a phishing attack, you're not going to be able to shut them down based on volume.
Right.
Yeah.
Spear phishing.
So you guys remember I told you about Grandma Franklin, who got that email with an invoice from the Geek Squad saying, we're going to charge you, or thank you for your $400 payment.
Yeah.
And, to resume your service. Well, it turns out that of all websites, Reader's Digest has this, and they may have just gotten the story from somewhere else, but the story is, what is the Geek Squad scam and how you can avoid it? and it turns out there's multiple scams involving the Geek Squad. So I don't know if it's coming from different actors, or if, one hacking group said, hey, we're having good luck with the psychology of the Geek Squad, and, everybody created their own Geek Squad scam. I don't really know, but it's a thing.
Yeah.
It is weird that it's a thing too, because
if it works, then they do it.
Right. But it's so weird because I've never received an invoice from the Geek Squad.
Well, you're also not 70, 80 years old, right? I mean, Geek Squad is kind of like the trusted brand among people who don't really understand computers, isn't it?
And they don't have a niece or a nephew who's tech savvy they can offload this to.
Yeah, I've told my mother to bring her stuff to Geek Squad, when it breaks. Just because they can actually deal with things that I can't.
Yeah.
Now I wonder, is this more of just a United States thing?
I would think so.
Is Best Buy / Geek Squad everywhere?
Yeah, I don't know if Best Buy is international.
I don't think I've seen one offshore, but I haven't gone looking either.
But it is interesting because if we go through these scams real quick, they say here are the top scams you're going to receive from. This is almost like a Letterman top 10, but this is the top scams you're going to receive from Best Buy. Number 1, auto renewals. Hey, thanks for your purchase, your renewal of the McAfee, antivirus from Geek Squad. Thanks a lot, blah, blah, blah. You sent us, $400. We really appreciate it. And then you call up and then they scam you out of more money.
Right.
Well, what they typically do is they ask you for the credit card so they can put it back on.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put it back on, but I need all that credit card information so I can put this charge back.
Yeah, so I can refund the money to you. It's like, wow, that's weird. You took the money without it, but you now need to put it back. Oh, yeah.
Something smells fishy. And we also should mention that in no way does this reflect poorly on the legitimate Best Buy Geek Squad brand.
No.
That it's good stuff. So this is clearly scammers that do not work for Geek Squad. Yeah.
Right. Don't have a legitimate job.
No,
Sending
they
out
don't.
Scams.
Okay, so are we done with Azure?
I think we are. I think we're done with Azure.
Yes.
Okay. Stranger Strings.
Stranger Strings.
An exploitable flaw in SQLite.
Which most people would believe they're not using SQLite, but I'd be shocked if they weren't in some application.
So let me tell everybody what SQLite is. SQLite is a SQL, structured query language database that is light. SQLite. In other words, it just uses a single file. It's usually used on a client side, on a phone app or in a browser application or something like that, or a Windows app or a Mac app. It's where you don't have access to a database and you only need to store structured data locally, usually. Right?
Yep.
So this is a flaw.
This is a flaw. This is actually really interesting. I think it's pretty awesome, and I love these type of exploits. So, for all the hardcore C and C++ developers out there, they probably know that using something like sprintf from eons ago, very hard to secure, because if you, let's say I say, what's your name? And you type your name into an application and then I hit enter. And then the next thing is an sprintf, which is just a print your name out, print a variable.
Show you what you type.
And it doesn't print on the printer. It prints to the screen.
Prints right out to the screen. So I say, hello, Carl, something along those lines. Well, what happens if I start putting in custom characters in there? Like what happens if I put in %s? Well, in sprintf, now it's looking for a string to print in that area, but where's it going to get the string? Well, it has no idea, so it just pulls it from memory. So it just pulls some random bit of information out of memory. Yeah. So what's really neat about these old sprintf bugs is you can say, oh, here's what I'd like to do. I want to print in, a string, but I want that string to come from 400 bytes in the future or 400 bytes in the past in the memory stack. And it starts printing out random strings. So at this point, you can get memory addresses of loaded libraries. You can get all sorts of stuff.
Potentially passwords in memory.
So sprintf bugs are super dangerous and really cool to play around with, to say leak the value of a canary when on a stack that's trying to protect the stack.
All right. You're losing me here, Geordie LaForge.
Sorry, let me step back a little bit.
Please explain.
So when you overflow a buffer, if you ask somebody for, let's say, their username and you're expecting 10 characters and they give you 11, what happens?
Yeah.
In a very well-developed application, you don't take the 11th character. In a not so well-developed application, you take all 11 characters, and that 11th character overwrites the null that's typically at the end of the string. And now your username bleeds into the rest of memory. That's a buffer overrun.
Now here's the thing. Modern applications are written using frameworks that protect against those things. The memory is all managed and the developer doesn't have to manage their own memory.
So a big advantage of those frameworks.
A huge advantage of those frameworks. Java is one, .NET is another one, and anything that runs on the JVM is another. And so the problem is these older programs, C++ programs and C programs, you had to say, okay, I want to allocate 10 characters for the first name, as you said, right? And then when I'm done with it, I deallocate it. Like, you're actually having to clean up your messes.
Yes, literally clean
up the memory. And it completely allows for this buffer overrun error where if you write 11 characters into a 10 character space, it just uses the next position in memory, whatever that is.
Right.
And writes to that.
Let's back up a little bit. So I want to explain canary because it's a cool concept. And
that was the whole idea.
Everybody's going to be. So let me start with the actual, back physical, and I got a war story to go with it.
Back in my day.
You open up the can of worms. So the saying is a canary in a coal mine. And that's from the idea that when you're in a coal mine, the dangerous thing is the buildup of gases that kill the men, not the soldiers, the miners. Yeah. So there used to be a practice of bringing a canary in a cage down into the mine because the canary was very sensitive to those gases and would die very quickly. And if the canary died, everybody should get out of the mine.
Right.
So that's the canary in a coal mine.
Yeah.
When I went over to the Gulf War and I was in Saudi Arabia in a place called Cement City, waiting to deploy so we could attack into Iraq, there was a person in the brigade or division, a woman, who had a canary in a thing that she would carry around. And if it died, they would call it a chemical attack and they would get everybody in mop gear because that canary and I was shocked by that.
Wow.
But that's the explanation I was given because I don't think we were allowed pets. I wasn't allowed to bring my pets to the war.
No.
Yes, but if it was a service canary, that's different.
Then it's okay.
So then the concept is that if I can put a value on the stack that I know is there, it's kind of like putting Scotch tape over your door. If you come home and the Scotch tape is gone, you know somebody's opened the door. So it's a way for you to know that someone's been messing with the memory because you put a canary there. You're not going to use it. You're not going to deal with it, but it's there to know if someone's been messing with your memory. So that's what Dwayne was talking about. If you can read that canary, well, now you can read the data.
And it's changed.
Now you can write that. Now you can write the canary. So what I can do is I can overflow. I can put 10 characters for the username. Then I can write the canary value in because I know what it is. Then I can put more code at the end of the canary. And at the end of the function, when it goes, oh, is the canary still there? It'll say, yep, it's still there. It's good. And then it'll run whatever I just put in memory. So this is the crux of this problem is the fact that sprintf and a lot of the older, you're right, C++ style applications allowed so much control over what you did in memory and how you manipulated, how you allocated, how you deallocated, and that sort of stuff. These bugs come up. Right. And a lot of older applications or even newer applications like this are still basing a lot of their core code on C and C++. I actually saw a tweet from Mark Rusinovich recently.
Microsoft guy, very low level, did a lot of low level tools for his own company and then went to Microsoft. Extremely smart guy.
Oh, brilliant developer when it comes to low-level C and C++. He tweeted, he was like, I can't wait until C and C++ is dead. Like, nobody should ever be programming in these languages
I think Mark's been on .NET Rocks a lot, hasn't he?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, great guy, bright guy, but even he's like, you know what? They're so prone to you writing.
Well, and he's
bugs.
like a patron saint of C++ back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a pretty big statement from him.
Right. Him and what is it, Charles Petzold? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so SQLite, be careful where you use it. How do you even know that you're using it?
Well, you don't. It's part of the problem with the supply chain. We don't know what our food is made of, and we don't know what our applications are made of. And actually, the application problem is more dangerous than the food thing.
So, what can we do about it?
The world is starting to. Well, that's one thing, but the world is starting to get wise to the idea of software bills of materials, so that when a problem like this comes up, you can know based on inventory of your software where SQLite is being used in what versions. But it's still in its infancy. Log4j kind of kicked off that effort, but it's going to be slow going. It's going to take years for people to get to the point where they know. This library has got a problem. Let me look up and see if I'm using it based on my inventory.
Right. Okay. Hey, Dwayne.
Yes.
Did your kids play Minecraft?
All the time.
Do they have any residual infections?
I'm sure they wrote a couple. Dude, Minecraft is awesome and super flexible. It's interesting you say that. The title of this next story from Atlas VPN is Minecraft most malware infected game with over 150,000 users affected. So Minecraft is super flexible. The original Minecraft was written in Java, and you literally could write a mod for it. And put it up on a server. And when people connected to the server, it would say, this mod is required. And you would say, yeah, okay, fine. I just want to connect to this server. And when it did, it would download and run whatever the developer had programmed. Could be anything. Could grab usernames and passwords, could do whatever. Normally they didn't, although apparently there are quite a few of them in there. So fast forward, there's this massive modding community out there because the game was so flexible, because the game was designed as kind of an open ability to develop new parts of the game, new, skins, which are just the way that the cubes and objects look inside the game. It was so flexible. It kind of invited creating these types of malicious, add-ons and that sort of stuff, which, is tough, honestly. I think if you're running a really good antivirus, a lot of those may pick them up, but problem is a lot of this might be custom code as well. It's interesting. We were on a pen test just this past week, a red team engagement. And we ran into, now this is going to sound weird. We actually did run into a Minecraft server in the engagement. And nobody on my team wanted to connect to it.
In other words, wait a minute. So did they know it was there?
Oh yeah. Customer knew it was there. Customer knew it was there. And I won't talk about the customer, but the customer knew it was there, and it was there for a reason. But nobody, what's that?
These the guys with 160,000 endpoints?
These are those guys.
Okay. Never mind.
Yeah. So, but none of my guys wanted to connect to it. They were like, you know what? We know how easy it is to infect a Minecraft server. Like, we're just going to leave that alone. Like, as long as it's on the outside and it's all isolated, we're not going to touch it.
It's like somebody who picks up dog crap for a living saying, I'm not touching that.
Right.
Or it's like
your job.
It's too gross.
Yeah. But it's also like we have an EOD on staff, bomb disposal guy. Literally. And
EOD?
Seven tours in Iraq, bombs disposal.
EOD.
Explosive ordnance demolition.
Okay.
Disarmed
Is that
bombs. No. Somebody else. Retired.
So, but it'd be like the EOD walking into a potential situation where there's a bomb and he goes, "Yep, I'm not touching it."
Yeah.
Just walking out of there. So Minecraft is definitely a scary thing if you notice a Minecraft server on a customer network. But, like I said, you've got to be careful with those.
It's like that Geico commercial where the guy walks into the attic and sees all the dolls and he's like, nope, no thank you.
That's awesome.
Hey, you know what hasn't been in the news enough lately? And I'm kind of kidding. Android. Android, the most secure platform without any bugs ever.
I wish there was a joke. I'm just crying.
Yeah.
iOS compared to Android is so apples and oranges nowadays. Microsoft got
It's apples and androids.
Apples and oranges. Well played, sir.
Well played.
When Microsoft got out of the game, Apple got religion about security, and Android didn't. And and the way their model works, I don't know that they ever will.
So in this particular case, they're still talking about applications that get deployed that ask for, super user-like privileges on your device. Like, oh, this is a QR scanner. Obviously, we need access to all of your storage, all of your contacts, all of your emails, all of your everything, and the camera so we can see the QR codes. And at that point, now they have access to the screen. So they can actually read other QR codes. So let's take, for example, you sign up like a good person. You sign up for 2FA. You log into a website. You say, I want multi-factor authentication. What's the first thing it presents you with? Well, it presents you with a QR code so that you can then have that, import that like into your Google Authenticator or your Microsoft Authenticator so that it'll give you a code every 30 seconds. Well, now this application that has access to the screen also has that QR code. So they can now use it to log into whatever service you just signed up for. So, and because you've given them such super user privileges at this point, there's not much you can do other than burn the phone to the ground and go buy an Apple. So
now one would think that Google is running analysis against the code that you submit to the App Store and saying, I don't like what you're doing here.
No, because the problem is Google is putting that onus on the user. So, all right, are you ready? If I came to you, Carl, and I said, hey, I have an Android application that needs query all packages, is that okay?
Query all packages.
It's one of the permissions.
So this is a permission.
One of the permissions an app can request, query all packages. Is that okay? Yeah? No? How about it needs boot completed? Is that okay?
I would think most users, if they want to run the app, will just say yes.
Of course.
How about request ignore battery optimization? Is that okay? And we start thinking like, well, shoot, as a security researcher, I don't know which of these very well maybe, like there could be in the request ignore battery optimization where the battery actually comes to me and says, hey, I'm getting low on battery. Can we optimize? And instead of saying yes or no, because I have the privilege to respond to it, I say, give it a big long string of code that then injects into that function and then gives me root access to the phone. Is that a thing? Absolutely is a thing, right?
Wow.
So I don't even know which of these privileges are okay or not okay to say yes to. And Google goes, you know what? Let the user decide. Shoot, as a security researcher, I'm not qualified to do that.
So how does the user know what to do? I mean, is it to the point where you need to go look for every app that you want to install, you got to research it online and see if anybody else has had problems with it?
Let me give you some advice. And no one's going to want this advice because this advice is going to be super inconvenient.
Okay.
But the advice is this. So Dwayne and I are known to regularly, not every month, maybe not every quarter, but pretty regularly, we burn down the system that we use and we install everything fresh.
Yep.
And we start with bare assumptions and we don't restore from backup.
Nope.
Right.
What we do is we build it again, and it's time consuming. You do it while you're watching TV at night and maybe you switch to a new system, but it's super secure. No one does that with their phone.
Yeah.
But when you get your new phone, my wife just got her iPhone updated and they made it super convenient. They just download it from the cloud. Hey, but now every app she's ever installed or given permissions to in a questionable way is preserved on the new phone. It would be better if she started fresh and said, you know what? I got all my photos in iCloud. I'm going to just start it as a new phone. Don't use iCloud. I'll get my photos from somewhere else. I'll install all my apps one by one. But it's inconvenient because you'd have to log into everything. But it would be a better way.
Right. Figure out what apps you actually use. Yeah. Yeah.
Be a better way.
Yeah. And so It's tough. So for Android users, because I don't want to leave them out in the, in the cold, twisting in the wind.
That's for Google to do. That's Google's job.
Right.
I have my Android phones, actually my old ones, on the cement floor in my garage with about a 10-foot perimeter because I've heard they explode.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. You freaked me out when you said that because I have a bunch of Android phones we use for research. And I've jammed them all in a drawer. I got like 10 to 15 of them.
It's like speed. You just got to keep them plugged in. They can't get below 1% battery.
Yeah. So, but I over the years, my kids have had Android phones. I've had Android phones in the past, and what I've done with apps is if you scroll all the way to the bottom, if you're going to go install an app from the Play Store. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see the permissions the app is requesting. And you'll see a link to the developer site.
And if the developer's Hydra, don't install.
Right. Hail Hydra. So you'd want to go to the developer site, make sure it's actually a real site, not a single developer asking for all the privileges. But more importantly, look at the privileges it's requesting before you say, yeah, let's install this app. So that's my advice.
Okay.
Are we depressed yet?
I'm always excited.
Yeah, that's the scary thing.
The internet, the internet's always a dumpster fire, and I'm always the guy with the popcorn.
Yeah.
All right. So, have you guys heard of Jenkins?
I've heard of Leroy Jenkins.
Well, there used to be like an Ask Jeeves site, and Jenkins kind of has that same butler with a towel over his arm icon, but they're two totally different things. Jenkins is an application. It's a platform that's used for building, testing, deploying software, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And they've just disclosed dozens of 0-day bugs in multiple plugins. So not Jenkins itself, but the plugins.
Oh, the WordPress model.
The WordPress model of hacking.
The WordPress model.
we know Jenkins. We've installed servers to test on and things like that.
Yeah.
It's
tough.
Here? If you take a platform like WordPress or take a platform like Jenkins, you want to make it as flexible as possible and you want to wrap a community around it. We've all done this when we've built applications to sell and whatnot. You want a community of people who can help be a force multiplier for developing new features and moving with the market. That's a common thing. So plugins are not, it's not like, oh, how bad of them to allow for plugins. It's honestly allows them to morph to the market faster than they might be able to do as an organization themselves and allow the market to create the things they need. The downside is I'd say most developers are not typically focused on security, especially in a place like Jenkins, because you say, listen, it's just a build server, right? So I'm going to put this plugin together to do a thing that I need to do. And my build server is internal, so what do I care? I just want to make sure that it works, so they make it so it's not super secure. It just adds to the building process. And then you release that plugin, and then other people happen to use those plugins on places that aren't as secure, like external networks. And that's where you run into the issues where the developer didn't have security in mind for that plugin, and the people who went to use it just assume that the developer did. And then you run into those problems. And this is, like you had said, there are 34 security vulnerabilities, 29 plugins for Jenkins open source automation server. 29 bugs were 0 days when they were reported. And this is everything from XSS to cross-site request forgeries to, you name it. So there's all sorts of different webby style bugs in here. You just want to make sure whatever plugins you're using, you either A, read the code to the plugin. And I say that, and nobody's going to do it. But like in our world, for example, in the red teaming world, when we're breaking into an organization, if I use a piece of open source code, an open source proof of concept for an exploit, I have to read every line of that code. Because if I run that, and understand it, because if I run it inside of a customer's organization and it causes damage, that's on me, right? Yeah. Same thing here. If you're going to use something on a critical system and it's open source, you have to read through it and make sure you understand what it's doing and what the risks may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's doing that.
Yeah, it's inconvenient.
No.
I get it. Just download it and run it.
It's great advice. It's just not going to happen. The problem is that it becomes less expensive to build your own.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, I know the three of us are skilled at looking for security vulnerabilities in code. We could all do code reviews and read through and say, oh, well, you're not using parameterized queries here for your SQL server, so you're obviously, potential of SQL injection and that sort of stuff. There's a very, very, very small subset of developers who are security minded enough to know where they could find
and that's developers. You're not going to get anybody who's not a developer to look at code. And
it's tough. I get it, right? Because you might be a really great developer, but not trained in looking for security manipulation of code. So you might look at the plugin and go, yeah, looks good to me. I mean, quality code, it's documented, does what it should do. Right. Whereas the three of us might look at it and go, oh, dear God, never put that in production.
What you could do, though, is you could look at companies that are similar to your own that are able to do that kind of review and look at what they're using. For example, it wouldn't be a stretch to say, well, I know that there's a lot of companies using Slack. I know it's been put through its courses. There's a lot of people in the security world using Signal. I know it's well vetted. You could probably be safe to say we're going to use Slack and we're going to use Signal, and we're comfortable with that. And whether you use GoToMeeting or Adobe or Zoom, you could look at that. But it's these no names that you've never heard of, but you found them through a web search. That's where you get yourself in trouble. And the problem with that is it keeps the market to just play with the established. So I don't know how to fix this without saying, okay, we've got enough vendors, let's leave it alone. You got to either do some testing in a web environment, and not a web environment, in a sandbox environment to see what they're doing, or make sure that you get reviews. For example, messaging. We use Signal. Signal is the gold standard. If you want, I don't do messages in most other formats, WhatsApp and all that stuff. Signal's the thing. Will it be in another year and a half? Maybe, maybe not.
What's so great about Signal?
Signal is actually really nice in that it's end-to-end encryption from client to client. So the Signal server itself doesn't have the ability to read the message.
Oh, that's nice.
The other thing that's nice about Signal is you have the ability to set up an automatic burn for messages. So I can say message, like between Patrick and I, we will talk over Signal and our messages burn every 24 hours. So when I send Patrick, hey, what are we going to do with this customer or whatever, you'd have to get to it within 24 hours because both our devices are going to cook that message.
It's massively inconvenient, which it makes it great.
Oh, it's plenty. Yeah, because there's plenty of times Patrick will go, hey, I know you sent me that link 48 hours ago. Can you send it again? I'm like, dear God, man. Yeah, exactly. But it's needed, especially in what we do. Honestly, and probably more than I should share, but when we engage with customers, we'll obviously get access to VPN into their environments and that sort of stuff. For any sensitive information, we like to break it up over multiple chains. So, for example, when a customer is going to give us, hey, here's the username and password to log into our VPN, we tell them not to send us that in email. That would be very bad because if somebody breaches my email, they'd have both keys they need. So they might send us, the username on a phone call, and then over Signal, they might send us the password. So at that point, we break that chain up, right? And then we have that burn relatively quickly. So yeah, great platform for communicating.
All right, we have one more story, and we mean that.
We promise. One more.
OpenSSL. What is it? And what happened?
So OpenSSL is this is an Ars Technica article, but honestly, you'll see it all over the place. OpenSSL is a library that is used to process encryption. Let's put it that way. So X509, a secure socket layers encryption. Where is it used? Any of your bank websites, any website where you see that little lock, in the upper left-hand corner by the address bar, they're using SSL. Could be potentially using OpenSSL. Email servers, when you send secure and encrypted emails, they're using OpenSSL. All your applications on your phone are probably using SSL to communicate to back-end servers. So, SSL is widely used.
But OpenSSL isn't SSL.
Correct. So OpenSSL is an open source library that is used to process those certificates, those X509 certificates for encryption and decryption. And it happened to be discovered that there is a buffer overflow in the OpenSSL library that allows you to potentially...
programmers.
Right. allows you to potentially have a remote code execution. So the postulate was, I believe this was by Mark Hutchins. What if there was an open SSL library being used by a mail server? And what if I sent a signed encrypted email to that mail server with a malicious signature, a malicious certificate associated with it? I could get remote code execution on that server just by sending the email, because the server would go to process it, decrypt the email, and it would run the remote code execution for me. So that sounds really bad, right? A lot of people at first were like, "Oh my gosh, is the internet going to burn to the ground?" What we're coming to find is it's not that exploitable. It's not that widely accessible. So yeah, it's a big deal, but it's not as big a deal as people were making it out to be originally. So, moral of the story: make sure that if you are using OpenSSL, that it is patched. Because I believe there is a patch for this now. This was last week that this was all the rage and the hype.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of Linux distros, distributions that actually held up their builds last week until there was a patch, and then put their builds out. So there's a patch for it. Just make sure, but don't get all crazy about it. It's not the next.
Speaking of hype, there's been a pushback that Dwayne's pointed out to me personally that. Some of the bigger players in the cyber world are starting to take away cool points for people who try to make too much out of issues like this.
Yeah.
And that's good. There's self-policing in the cyber ranks of people. Bruce Snyder and some of the more luminary voices are starting to say, look, if you're trying to scare people with this stuff, there's enough stuff to scare people. You don't need to over-exaggerate. The truth is scary enough.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So let's not make mountains out of molehills. Now, sometimes when it first comes out, they're like, well, this could be really bad. And they're right. But once we find out, okay, it's been mitigated a little bit because you'd have to have this and you'd have to have that. And these three things would have to happen. But there are still some people who will go forward and try to scare you with that information.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Patrick, because we see a lot of security companies out there using that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So whatever the latest and greatest exploit is, name your thing. OpenSSL 3 patch, text for shells, log for shells, you name it, right? Whatever the exploit is that comes out, within 24 hours, you'll see some security company go, well, we would have protected you from log for shells. And you're like, oh, please stop. Honestly, you should not be using fear to try and sell your product.
That's what lying is for.
Thank you, Patrick.
No fear. It should be lying. That's what you sell products with.
Everybody knows that.
And on that note, shut your pie hole. We'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.